What is up, guys? Strike here. These videos take a long time to make when they cover this much content. Please check out the coaching service, like, subscribe, and we'll get right into it. We're gonna get right into it. First one we're gonna go over here is press the attack. So what you need to know about press the attack is right up on the screen here. So basic attacks against enemy champions apply a stack for 4 seconds, refreshing on subsequent applicants, expiring upon attacking a new champion, stacking up to 3 times. The third attack consumes all stacks. It deals 40 to 160 based on bonus level adaptive damage, and it grants you 8% increased damage against champions. So the most important thing to talk about with this is the fact that it's a 6-second cooldown. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take this on champions that are looking for either short trades with 3 or like Kaisa, where after proccing press the attack and then getting all of our damage in, when we proc our passive, we're going to do an additional amount of damage. This is going to be good and it'll help you take out tankier members in the front line. Now, there are other runes that are less aggressive. This is a pretty aggressive rune within the precision tree. So 3 hits, not 3 instances of damage, has to be 3 auto attack hits, and then it procs, you see there, and then we can get our passive off. Our passive does more damage. So on to the next rune. Alright, so the next rune we're going to be talking about, you'll see it up on the screen here, it's Lethal Tempo. So, base attacks on attack against an enemy champion grant a stack for 6 seconds, refreshing on subsequent attacks, and stacking up to 6 times. Gain 5% attack damage and attack speed for each stack, up to 30% at 24%. Sorry, not attack damage, attack range. So it gives you 24% attack range and attack speed. So what's really useful about this is the fact that you're going to get adaptive damage and you're going to get adaptive range. So this is more useful, unlike press the attack, for those extended fights. So what you're going to see here is as I attack here, we can see it stacking up in the bottom tier. And then once we get to 5, you can see what happens now is that I gain attack speed ramping, and I also gain on hit damage. So this is going to be a lot more useful for when you are in extended trades. Extended trades being trades where you're going to be able to get at least 6 attacks in, which means that in early game, that's going to be like a 6-second fight. So you're going to be taking this into games where there's probably a lot more tanks and you need to kite more, and that you're gonna be in these fights for a very, very long time. It's also better on AD carries that are usually playing at a further range, because you're going to be going in and out a lot less, and you're just going to be consistently front to backing the entire team fight, which is a pretty standard thing, but still. So you see this a lot more in games where there's a lot of tanks. Once again, this is a heavy combat rune. Champions that have a lot of attack speed or like to build a lot of attack speed, like Kaisa, are going to like this rune a lot, solely because it synergizes with their kit, right? But there are other champions, you know, like you could say Bel'Veth would like this a lot too, or, you know, maybe Kog'Maw. But there are going to be other champions where it's just not going to be as useful to take Lethal Tempo, because you're not going to be looking for these extended fights, and you're not going to be an attack speed heavy champion. Like, I would never take Lethal Tempo on a Darius, for example. Alright, so okay, guys, so the next room we're going to be talking about is going to be Fleet Footwork. Now, Fleet Footwork, you can see it up on the screen here, also in the Precision Tree. Energize. Moving and basic attacks generate charges up to 100 charges. You can see the charges down here, bottom right here. As I use the ability, now obviously the charges have to be built back up by moving. At 100 charges, become energized, empowering your next basic attack to heal you for 10 to 130 for melee champs, 6 to 78 based on level. Plus bonus AD and AP, and grant 20%, 15% bonus movement speed for 1 second against minions, and healing is 15% effective. You can read it there. So, what does that mean? This rune is primarily used for short trading and sustains. Now, not short trades in the way earlier, like press the attack, where you're trying to burn out your opponent. More so in instances where you have an advantage in range, or you know that you're going to be playing into a very poke-heavy lane, and you're going to get hit with a lot of poke, so you're wanting to stay in lane for as long as possible. You use Fleet Footwork to heal, right? So we keep moving up, and then we keep moving around, or we keep auto-attacking, usually moving around, till we have that charge, and then we can get a good auto off on either the enemy champion or on the enemy minions to get a last hit in order to build up that stack. Now, something that's important about Fleet Footwork is it does not proc off of abilities, it only procs off of auto attacks. Now, the other thing you need to know about this is if you are a melee champ, this is not going to be your best sustain rune. This is majority taken by ranged people when into lanes that are incredibly oppressive, where you need it in order to stay healthy. For example, if you were playing into an Ashe MF bot lane, where there's just constantly going to be abilities thrown at you, or a, Lux MF bot lane or Lux Ashe bot lane, Lux Caitlyn, something where you need to stay healthy in order to avoid the all-in. So keep that in mind, and Fleet Footwork is pretty basic. So the next rune we're going to take a look at that you can see here is Conqueror. So passive, dealing damage to enemy champions, grants stacks of Conqueror lasting up to 5 seconds, refreshing on subsequent damage to champions. So this can be auto attacks or abilities, stacking up to 12 times, gain 2 attack damage, 1 attack damage for range, 2 attack for melee, stacks from basic attacks, and 2 stacks from abilities, spells, and active items. So the important thing about this is at max stacks, you also heal for 8% of post-mitigation damage dealt to champions. So this gives you healing as well as adaptive damage. It can be very good on champions like Bel'Veth, as you can see here, where I can, oops, let me clear the dummies here, where I can obviously auto and then use an ability to stack 2 procs, and then by the time I'm all the way up, you can see that I have more damage than I would otherwise, right? You can see I'm doing 63 here. Now, if I stop and obviously let the Conqueror stacks run out here, what you'll see is if I do an auto attack, see, 49. So you do get a substantial amount of damage from Conqueror being stacked up as well as healing. Now, the thing that you really need to know about Conqueror is it is something where either you want to be playing a champ like Bel'Veth where you can stack it up very quickly, or, excuse me, or you want to be playing a champion where you're going to be in those extended trades and extended fights. It's not nearly as good on ranged people, but ranged characters can take it as well. You'll notice that a lot of the stats are debuffed within the precision tree for ranged champions simply because of the fact that, well, if you're ranged, you already have a combat advantage most of the time in terms of being able to space your opponents and everything. So everything in the precision tree and in many of the other trees, you see higher stat buffs for melee champions versus the ranged champions. But we will move on to the next rune. So, as you can see here, the next one we're going to be going over is Electrocute. So, Electrocute, damaging basic attacks, abilities, items, and effects, summoner spells, as well as the application of crowd control and damage over time effects. So pretty much anything that does damage or strikes an opponent can proc the Electrocute proc. So, generate stacks against enemy champions, up to 1 stack per champion, applying 3 stacks. 3-second period causes them to be struck by lightning after a 0.25-second delay, dealing 50 to 190 damage, and then adaptive damage on top of that. Jeez, I don't know why that was so hard to get out. So, it's pretty basic. When you're going to want Electrocute, it's when you're going to be running a champ that is pretty much burst. Now, the thing about Fiddlesticks here is that he obviously runs burst, right? He wants to jump in, fear, do a lot of burst. His W is also a dots, right? Now you can see that it's on cooldown now because I just used it, but overall the application of Electrocute is pretty simple in how it works. There's also a passive timer on how many times Electrocute can be procced on one person, right? So here, if I did an auto and a fear, and then I just need one more hit, and then you see the Thunderbolt come down, and that's Electrocute. It's pretty basic. You're going to want it when you're playing high burst into squishy targets. It's not going to be as useful when you're playing this into tanks because the Electrocute proc doesn't really add on that much damage, so it's more so useful into comps that are going to be squishy the whole game. So guys, the next rune we're going to go over is Dark Harvest. So the way that Dark Harvest works is that it is up on the screen right here. Damaging basic attacks and abilities against champions below 50% max health, deal 20 plus 9 per soul, plus 10% AD, plus 5% AP, bonus adaptive damage after 1.7 seconds delay. Reap one soul. This cannot occur again for 35 seconds, resetting to 1 second upon scoring a takedown against an enemy champion. While on cooldown, you can also reap souls from receiving the kill credit from a champion killed, minion, monster, or turret. So this is pretty self-explanatory. The way that it works in simple terms is every single time you damage somebody or kill something below 50% health, that is a main objective or a champion, you get a soul stack. You can see it down here right over my bar. So what you'll see here is you'll see this as soon as it gets below half health, it will display a little icon, and then that little red icon on it, once I hit it, you see I collect the soul. And now that I have the soul, I have two. And as the game goes on, I will progressively get more damage. You're going to want this in the comps where you know you're going to be fighting a lot, you have a lot of AoE, and you want scaling damage in order to stay relevant in the game. Fiddlesticks is a champion that uses this. It's going to be used in games where you know that the fights are going to be going on for a long time and there's going to be a lot of people in the fights. Or if you plan on ganking a lot and you're a very big snowball champion where you can make use of stacking a lot of souls and then using that to kind of bully the enemy laner or enemy jungler, etc. So that's pretty much it for Dark Harvest, and we will move on to the next one. What is up, guys? So looking at the next rune here, we're going to take a look at Hail of Blades. The way that Hail of Blades works is when it is ready, you will see the icon above. Starting a attack windup against an enemy champion triggers Hail of Blades, and if the windup completes and you actually attack, you gain 2 stacks of the effect for 3 seconds, with the duration refreshing on a basic attack against an enemy champion until the stacks are consumed. Stacks are consumed per basic attack on attack, and the current stack refresh on hit whenever your basic attack timer is reset. While Hail of Blades is active, you gain 110% attack speed as a melee character. You gain 80% attack speed as a ranged character. Now what that means is this is extremely useful on champions that have auto attack resets like Master Yi that obviously are going to allow him to attack second, or he's going to attack twice every fourth attack, or people like Vayne who have to get a lot of attacks out in order to trigger their passive. Vayne's not the best example, but it's someone who could take this, as well as Kai'Sa, people who have passives or abilities based on auto attacks. So as you can see here, I'm going to attack, and then you can see how much attack speed I get right away, right? You can see how it goes up. The cooldown is relatively short considering, but it is a 12-second cooldown, but it's going to be something that you're going to want to use to front load your damage. So you can see here as I attack, 1.5 attack speed at the start, and then it falls off after the stacks are consumed. This is like Electrocute, like Press the Attack. You're going to want to be using this for upfront burst and quick assassinations on basic attack related champions. It's pretty basic. There's not much else to go into, so we will move on to the next rune. So the next rune we're going to be talking about is going to be Summon AERY. So you can see it here, Summon AERY. The way that this works, up on the screen, damaging basic attacks, abilities, item effects against an enemy champion. Signal AERY to pounce over them for 0.45 seconds, dealing 10 to 50 base damage, and then it is adaptive up over AD and AP as you get items. Healing and shielding or buffing an allied champion signals AERY to leap over to their side for 0.35 seconds, shielding them from 30 to 100 based on AD/AP. So the way that this works is it is primarily going to be ran on supports or champions that have both a shield, heal, or buff in their kit, as well as someone who wants to do poke damage against champions. Very good on champions like Janna, as seen here, where I can shield an enemy and then you can see the little AERY going around them, adding to the shield, and then it returns back to me, right? Now, the interesting thing about this is that it cannot be sent out again until it returns to you. So you can see here, as I shield, right, you can see the AERY is there, but until it gets back to me, when I attack, it's not going to go out and hit that enemy champion. So when I hit the enemy champion, you see that it goes out and attacks the enemy, and when I shield, it goes here, but you can't do both at the same time. For example, if I were to attack this person and then shield, you can see AERY is over here. It is now coming back to me. It did not go to the shielded target. Very, very useful on supports, very useful on champions that can do both poke damage and are looking to healed shield buff. So that's Summon AERY. pretty simple. I would recommend this on your utility champs. There's not really any compositions that this is necessarily bad into. You can play this into burst compositions. You can also play this into, tankier compositions where there's going to be extended fights. So, Arcane Comet, next one up on the screen here. Dealing an ability to an enemy champion hurls an Arcane Comet at their current location that lands after 0.825 seconds, dealing 30 to 130 based on level, AD, AP, physical damage to enemies, scaling on those stats as you go up with 140 radius impact. Now, dealing forms of ability damage reduces the remaining cooldown. Spell damage 20%, area damage 10%, per enemy hit, and persistent damage 5%. The important thing about Arcane Comet is the fact that it has to travel over 1 second. So, unlike Summon AERY, or it will not guarantee a hit unless the person who you're attacking is locked down in that area with some form of CC or slow. So as you can see here, when I throw Lux Binding, it locks them down long enough for it to go out and land onto the spot. Now, you'll see that again when I cast it again, exactly how long it takes, and that the enemy can see it coming because of the radius that shows up under their feet when you land the ability. So you can see here, I throw out this binding, it lands, and you can see it's traveling, and you can also see the hit radius. Now the reason that people take this is because unlike Summon Area, it may not be a guaranteed hit, but it does deal more damage. So with your mages that are going to be doing artillery that have the ability to slow and or lock down, like Lux, Xerath, there are several mages like this out there. It allows you to get more damage down, which can get someone into your execute range. This is going to be a good spell to take during laning phase. It's also something that scales well into late game. But out of the kind of tree for sorcery, this is going to be your best in terms of damage dealing. Summon Ares your best in terms of utility, and then we will get into the unique one next. So next, we will go over probably one of the most hated runes in the game up on the screen here, Phase Rush. So damaging basic attacks, abilities, item, effects, and summoner spells, um, as well as the application of crowd control and damaging over time effects. All gain stacks against the enemy champions. At 3 stacks, you get a 4-second period where you're granted 25 to 50 or 18 to 37% based on level bonus movement speed that also has a 75% slow resist for 3 seconds. So if you're into teams that don't have hard CC, or you build Merc Treads, or you're playing Garen and you have W, this is your get out of jail free card. You can see here, as I apply 1 attack, 2 attack, and then 3 attack, I immediately get 431 movement speed, and I can simply just run my way away. You can use this to chase enemies down, but usually it is used for short trades and to space. So any champion that wants short trades or wants to space because they have more healing or more range, or there's a lot of backline threats that they need to be able to quickly get 3 attacks out and then create distance, this is the rune for you. It's very good into compositions where if you don't have a survivability in terms of someone diving on top of you, or you need to take a lot of short trades where you can apply CC and then, or apply something like Garen's Silence and then get away after the trade, it's perfect. The other thing to note is that it is applying to existing movement speed. So if I Q here and I have more movement speed when I Q, like I did when I struck there, you saw my movement speed went up to 500. Now the reason it goes up to 500 is because the bonus movement speed that Phase Rush is applying is on your current movement speed. So if you have like a Zillion power up, a Rammus Q, Garen Q, that is all going to stack even more movement speed. People really, really don't like playing against this rune, and I can say that I am one of them. I find it very annoying. Alright guys, so the next rune up on the screen here is Grasp of the Undying. This is great for a stacking damage and sustain rune in lane where you have a melee versus melee matchup. maybe a ranged matchup, but it's very, very minimally effective. With range, you use a lot of the overall stats. It drops down to 2% max health instead of 3.5%. But anyways, so entering combat generates one stack every second for the next 3 seconds, refreshing duration with each instance of combat and stacking the effect up to 4 times. At max stacks, which is 4, your next basic attack or on hit within 5 seconds against an enemy champion consumes all the stacks to deal bonus magic damage equal to your maximum health percentage depending on if you're ranged or melee, and heals you for an amount of the max health damage done. It also permanently grants you 5 to 3 bonus health. So if you're in a lane, like a Dr. Mundo lane, where all you want is health, right? You can see as I attack here, you can see the stacks building up in the bottom corner hit here. So if I stop attacking, right, after the first attack, it will not generate all of the stacks. You can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4 goes away because I have to have at least 2 attacks within that range in order to generate enough stacks. There's 1 attack, there's 2 attacks. Now you can see it gets to 4. Now grasp is up. You can tell grasp is up because there's these little green things on my hands, right? That happens to any champion. There's a little green icon that shows up on their champion's little green effect. Now, what you're going to look to do with this ability is you're going to look to stack it up while you're in lane and potentially take winning trades because you're healing while you're trading. And then as I auto there, you can see I've taken that health and then I can keep going. The interesting thing about grasp, however, is if you watch here, I can keep attacking, wait for it to stack up, I can proc it, and then I can keep attacking, and then I can proc it again. There's really no cooldown on this when you're using it against champions. So the longer the fight where you can be alive and continue attacking, the more you will proc grasp. Now, something else to notice about this ability is depending on what you're playing with, it will not trigger the grasp, right? So my cleaver doesn't trigger the grasp because it's not a basic attack on hit ability, but any on hit ability that acts as a basic attack, like Kha'Zix's Q or something, will trigger grasp. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this one, and we will move on to the next one. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to go over is Aftershock. So Aftershock, immobilizing an enemy champion, grants you a static 35 plus 80% bonus armor, 35 plus bonus percent bonus magic resistance for 2.5 seconds, which is a decent amount of time. The bonus resistances are capped at 80 to 150 based on level. Now, this is going to be, well, let me continue. After the duration, you release a shockwave that deals 25 to 120 magic damage plus 8% of your bonus health magic damage to the enemy champions or monsters within 350 attack range radius. This is going to be super, super useful on all of your high damage, well, not high damage, high CC, because it has to be an immobilizing effect, engage supports, and potentially some of your other high engage champions. You're rarely going to take this into a top lane or mid lane matchup, even if you do have CC and want to jump in there. You're not going to be taking this on like a Galio, most likely. You're probably not going to be taking this on a Shen top lane, just because there are better runes like Grasp or Arcane Comet or Electrocute that you might want to run on different champions like that. This is going to be very useful, however, on your tank supports with CC. So as you can see here, 33, 30, but after I land this Q and fly in, right now I have 68 and 60 plus magic resistant, plus the damage that it does. So in a short engage down in bot lane early, you're getting an additional 28 damage, and that's if you hit one person. You might be able to hit two, but primarily what you're getting is you're getting such strong tank stats at an early point in the game that it allows you to play hyper aggressive into the engage while minimizing the amount of damage you take back to win the trade. So you see this rune run a lot on your engaged supports, and you see it a lot in bot lane when they want to get in and they want to secure that kill, right? Especially if you know you're playing against a bot lane that's going to fight back and scrap a little bit. So that's pretty much Aftershock. It's a pretty simple rune. Land your CC, get in there. What is up, guys? So we're going to talk about Guardian. So it's up on the screen here. While within 350 units of an allied champion, you raise your guard. Allied champions you affect within unit targeted abilities are also guarded for 3 seconds, regardless of distance. If you or a guarded ally would take 90 to 250 damage based on level within 2.5 seconds, or lethal damage from an enemy champion, monster, or turret, you both gain a shield for 45 to 120 based on your AP and health for 2 seconds. So as you can see here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attack this red buff. And then once it triggered Guardian, you can see that the shield applied to me and also applied to my ally. This is primarily going to be really useful on champions that want to get in and out and are looking to minimize damage and also play around low health, right? It's very useful on Rakan, but it's very rare that you're going to see this ran on a ton of other champions. Sometimes you'll see it ran on other champions that like to engage, but primarily I consider Aftershock to be a better rune. But that's pretty much it for Guardian. It's mostly used for supports. You're not going to see this ran in lane by much anybody else. So, the next rune we're going to go over, you can see up on the screen here, it is Glacial Augment. Passive. Immobilizing an enemy champion will cause 3 glacial rays to emanate towards you and other nearby enemy champions, creating ice zones within 700 units that last for 3 seconds. Within these ice zones, each have a width of 80 units, and the people within them are slowed by 20% based on some scaling, and they have their damage reduced by 15% against you and your allies. This is primarily going to be useful for taking care of a lot of enemies that want to be really mobile and trying to slow them down so that your backline carries can get on them. This is not something that you're commonly going to see ran on a lot of champions unless they are playing support and they are trying to set up zones of control so that their damage dealers can take action. So as you can see here with Thresh, right, we have Glacial Augment up, and if I walk up here and I flay these, you can see these 3 zones show up with Frost that slow the enemy champions. Now, it's important to note that the zones of ice happen in the direction that the CC is casted. So as I casted that CC down, the frozen zones or the ice zones or, whatever you want to call them, they showed up in that direction. Now, if I were to flay up, you can see that the zones display up. Now, from the point of where they're hit, then they go out and they'll attach to any surrounding champions. So that's why you saw 2 go this way and you saw 1 go this way in the direction of the strike. So that is pretty much how Glacial Augment works, and it's pretty good when you're trying to run people down. Guys, so this is a little bit of a different one. This is Unsealed Spellbook. While not channeling teleport and being out of combat for 5 seconds, you can swap to an additional summer spell and swap out your summoner spells. You cannot use this to select a summoner spell you've already equipped. Your first swap becomes available after 6 minutes with the initial 300-second cooldown. Selecting a unique summoner spell reduces the swap time by 25 seconds. You must swap the 3 different summoner spells before returning to one that has already been used. Now, this is a little bit of a goofy one. I had to fast forward the game just to show you guys this so we could get to 6 minutes. Ignore the crazy minion waves. Wow, look at that. So, as you can see, I teleported, right? Now it's on cooldown. Well, that's fine. I can just swap to a different summoner spell. And now, in the next, 300 seconds, or current swap timer is 275 seconds. Every time I swap, this lowers by 25 seconds. I can keep swapping summoner spells. The reason that this is useful is primarily going to be on champions like Nasus, where you have like very clear power spikes where you're not really trying to fight or do anything in lane until you have your ultimate and you have some stacks and stuff. So this allows you to run teleport and maybe flash and be extra safe, and then later on in the game switch to something like Ghost and Ignite and be a lot more aggressive. This is a very, very rare keystone to take, and it takes a very particular play style where you have a very specific plan to use your summoner spells to be aggressive and to be passive. I have very rarely used this in all of the years I've played League, and I don't see it used very standard. It's not really a composition keystone, it is more of a playstyle keystone. So we will move on to the last and next one. Alright guys, looking at the last rune here, it's First Strike. So, dealing damage or applying a crowd control effect to an enemy champion within the first 0.25 seconds of champion combat grants 10 gold, and First Strike for the 3 seconds after, causing all of your post mitigation damage after the first initial damage or CC to deal an additional 7% bonus true damage, and you are granted gold equal to the amount of damage dealt. 50% for melee, 35% bonus damage for ranged. Now, this can be displayed as the passive. You know that it is off cooldown when this little orb appears next to your champion that floats around. Now, as you can see here, if I hit this with my Q, it flies, hits, does 5 true damage, and then as you can see, I just got 2 gold from that. I can check right here. So I got 2 gold from the damage, I got 10 gold from the initial strike, and the damage dealt by the rune itself was 6 true damage. Now, the important thing to keep in mind with this is if you get hit, your first strike goes on cooldown. So this is primarily going to be useful for champions where you know that you can strike first, whether because you have a range advantage or you have an ability range advantage, because if you get hit first, it goes on cooldown. So this is meant specifically for aggressive lanes where you know you can strike first, hence first strike. Now, the other thing that's useful about this is it can be used in burst situations where you know you can apply a lot of damage in order to generate more gold. As you can see that time, I got 6 gold. So, First Strike, kind of a niche rune, can be very good for those really aggressive players who are trying to get in quick, do a lot of damage up front, ignore those stats, but you got to make sure that you're the first one in when you take this rune. Primarily good into squishy comps and into tanky comps because there is true damage involved, but you need to have some sort of kit if you're going to play this rune where you're getting a lot of damage out in the first 3 seconds of combat. So if you're more of an extended fight, over time damaging champion, this isn't going to be the rune for you.